edge of the sea.
Make sure I have the sound off on the actual.
GaryCon 2 going up.
Yeah, by the way, does everybody's mic sound okay?
You're loud and clear, 5x5. Yeah, I think I have a better mic now, which is nice. And I have this little doohickey here where I can.
Harbor Town is an all-new series from Miniature Building Authority, the leader in tabletop gaming scene.
And I can control the volume as well.
Flexible and playable.
Someone please check GaryCon 2. Someone check GaryCon 2. Because it says 30. Are they still on the other channel?
I can check GaryCon 2.
I think they were wrapping up when I last checked.
Or did I kick them?
Cyberpunk Red is on.
GaryCon 1, yeah.
No, on
GaryCon 2.
GaryCon
Yes.
2
Oh no, there you are.
Yep,
It's
there he is.
up on Gary. Yeah, it just popped in.
Yep.
Yes, our mics are on because this is our shtick here. You should know that. Come on, there. We talk over everything here. Although my voice is burnt, but we're gonna get through all this. We're gonna get through it.
Don't forget throat lozenges and get some tea, Jay.
Yeah, I had a cappuccino earlier. I think that was.
I had a Mexican Coca-Cola, so I'm revved up.
Entry screen.
Yes, he's got the real sugar going.
Oh yes, I do.
Yep.
Oh God, I love that art.
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't make me come over there, David. Snafu's already throwing shade.
Wow, that really came out nice. Good props. Good.
Yeah.
He said, "What is this Greyhawk thingy?"
Let me do my old man pose as I look through the different parts of my progressive lenses to put everything into focus. There we go. That's better.
Yeah, so I'm only on one monitor because my new laptop doesn't support my old one. So does it matter which I'm watching?
No, you should watch for the giveaway. You should watch Lord Kazama because of the giveaways. Because you're going to be talking about the giveaways.
No. I meant, should I be looking at the Zoom or looking?
Take our picture for my split that I'm giving to you, and that's live. So you may want to blow that.
Yeah. The other one is like 10-second delay.
Yeah, we're coming on already, guys, because we're at 9:03.
So are we actually talking live right now?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course we are.
Yeah.
Of course we are.
Hi, everybody.
We are back. Welcome, everyone. I went to the wrong screen. My bad. I went to the wrong screen because I'm used to hitting button number 1. There we go. Hey, I'm Jerry Killer Kazumba. We have a great crowd tonight for our celebrating Greyhawk, a Fandom Renaissance. So I'll introduce everyone, and then Christoph will take it from there. We have Brian Blumklotz, Alan Groh, Mike Bridges, Anna Meyer, and Christoph Nolan. And we're going to really rock it up here with all the great stuff going on in Greyhawk. Christoph, take it away, please.
Hi, everyone. So pretty much, I think most of the reason that everybody's here is obviously because most of you know what the world of Greyhawk is. There are some of you, I'm sure, that are coming in from the GaryCon channel. There's probably a few of you coming in from seeing virtual sign up or whatever. So the big deal is that the world of Greyhawk is the original world written by Gary Gygax back in the 1970s. And so for a very, very long time, one of the big things that Gary always said, and was very, very emphatic about, and even in the Greyhawk Adventures hardback and stuff like that. Matter of fact, there on screen is the quote from Steve Winter. Greyhawk is ours, and it was intended to be ours from the very, very beginning. So the fandom is intended to take Greyhawk and make it their own. And there's a lot of published information out there, maybe not quite so much as others, but even with all of the Greyhawk content that's published and printed, we're still intended to take that and make it different for each of our home campaigns. Or, if you write for other people, or if you do art or whatever, still make Greyhawk your own. And so this live stream is largely about fandom and what everybody's doing with Greyhawk and how everybody's making it their own, and how especially with the resurgence of things like social media, like Facebook and Twitter, and the resurgence of, or not resurgence, but the immersion of things like what we're doing here, live streaming, there are all these new avenues of approach for seeing Greyhawk in new forms. And even with the advent of 5th edition, in some of the earlier editions, we didn't quite see as much of Greyhawk as we would like, but now there's little hints of Greyhawk all throughout all of the new books and stuff, and especially in the player's handbook, it's mentioned by name, and so people are interested in not just again, but new people that have never heard of the world of Greyhawk are now beginning to ask questions, and they're coming out and they're saying, what is the world of Greyhawk? How do I play it? Where do I find it? Where do I look it up? And so there's all these fans, both new and old, 1st edition to 5th edition, and everybody is interested in finding out about the world of Greyhawk. And so what we want to talk about tonight is how we make it our own, what people are already doing with it, what kind of projects people are going forward doing, and some of our own favorite projects, and individually what each one of us is doing with it that makes it special or different for each one of us. So why don't we go around and start introducing everybody, and we can just kind of start on the top row, I guess, and just go all the way down. I think a lot of you know who Jay Scott is up here, Lord Gasumba. He's the host of the Legends and Lore show with Anna and Mike. He is the host of one of the channels we're on right now. By the way, speaking of channels real quick, I do want to mention we're dual streaming. We are on the GaryCon 2 channel, I believe, and we're also live streaming from the Lord Gasumba channel. Later in the evening, we're going to be doing a bunch of giveaways, and those are going to be available through the Lord Gasumba. So if you want, you can open a new tab in your browser and make sure you type ! Drawing, and that will register you for some of the giveaways we're doing.
Let me
later
start it first.
I'm
starting it up right now.
Give him a minute, and he'll start up the registration. So yeah, Jay, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little about the Lord Gasumba channel and what you're doing?
My name is Jay Scott. It's been a long a couple days already. My name is Jay Scott. You may know me as Lord Gasumba. Gasumba is a character in my campaign. I started playing Greyhawk when 1980, actually a little bit before that, but we started our campaign in that year. And our campaign's been going on with my friends for 40 years. We believe it's the longest ongoing Greyhawk campaign in existence, and we've been having a blast at it. And then about 2 years ago, we decided to get into streaming, and I'm so happy I did, because I've met a lot of great people from the experience, and it's been a wonderful experience, and that's enough for me for now. I guarantee I'll be talking a little bit more, but thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jay. So next down the row, we have Brian Blumkotz. He goes by Saracinis Online. Brian, why don't you tell us a little about your websites and what you do and such?
Well, I don't have a website per se, but I do run. Is my sound okay, by the way? Just
perfect.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I run the Greyhawk Resources, which just popped up on the screen there, Facebook group. I also have helped numerous Discord servers get started for Greyhawk and other things. I do Greyhawk heraldry, some of which you've seen on Jay's show if you watch any of his in the upper corner. You know, I've done some work for Anna. I've done my own personal work.
On my maps. Yep.
Yeah, and essentially, I've been playing about as long as Jay has. I started D&D about 79. I bought the folio in 1980 and haven't looked back. And I've also been a community builder. That's been kind of my big piece within pretty much all gaming fandom that I'm part of. And yeah, I think that pretty much describes me in a nutshell.
Awesome.
Well, I would like to point out that Brian does do heraldry.
Didn't I just say that though?
He actually has a sub-site on Greyhawk Online For those of you who are interested in fan-created heraldry, that is just, I mean, rather nice. You'll actually see some of it on the show tonight, scrolling through on the side panel over there. It's actually Greyhawk Online /heraldry. It's a little bit of older site. It hasn't been updated in a while, but that's one of the things we do on Greyhawk Online is we actually archive and host a lot of older sites and such, but very beautiful artwork that Brian does for
and I apologize for the barely web 1.0 presentation of that site. Code, HTML is not my native environment.
There you
go.
There is a link to Brian's stuff on Greyhawk Online in the top navigation bar if any of y'all are interested. So why don't we go next down the row to Alan Growy. He's known as Grow Dog and has a whole lot of really great information about Greyhawk and has been doing it for years. So Alan, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Hi guys. Like Jay and Brian, I started playing D&D back in the late 70s and fell in love with Greyhawk, like all of us have, and it's kind of been no looking back since then. I started up my Grow Dogs Greyhawk site in about, I don't know, 2000, 2001, something like that. I had kind of recently come back to D&D after playing a lot of non-D&D in the 1990s, and that drew me back to Greyhawk. I'd really never left Greyhawk fully. I had still kept all my original Greyhawk books and all that stuff when I was still playing lots of other stuff in the 90s, like Vampire and whatever. But that love for Greyhawk never faded. But with D&D's 3rd edition, it really brought me back into the fold, and I had joined the Greyhawk list and started kind of learning about the online fandom and met many of the folks on the show, as well as folks in the audience over the years. And then I've, let's see, more recently, I co-founded Black Blade Publishing. We published Ostrich, we published Rob Kuntz's Bottle City Adventure from Castle Greyhawk, a number of other works from Rob, and I don't know, that's enough.
All right, well, Alan has got so much going on. It's really rather amazing. There's links to his blog, Kuros Quill, and to Grow Dogs Greyhawk also on Greyhawk Online on the top navigation tab. Alan has worked with Greyhawk Online for many years, and quite honestly, Alan was one of the reasons that Greyhawk Online managed to finally sneak through to the modern era. So why don't we go down next to Mike Bridges. He has been a member of the Greyhawk community since back in the days when it was black and white text and it was on the IRC. Mike, why don't you tell us a little about you?
Fun biography time. So let's say I started gaming around 1982, I think, because I was 10 years old, and I felt I was, I'm old enough to play D&D, right? Anyhow, as to getting into the Greyhawk community, I felt like I kind of got in on it late, actually, because I joined the fan site Cannon Fire around 2002, somewhere in that area, after the site had been going. And when I joined that, then I started contributing articles, started doing comics. I started contributing to Orth Journal, and you imagine this is just snowballing. And so now here, present day, I'm doing a live streaming show, Legends and Lore with Anna and Jay. And I have my own blog at Greyhawkery, so many different projects. I was trying to tally it up the other day, and I think including comics, not including videos, I think I've done 1,400 pieces of Greyhawk work.
Yep, that's amazing.
And I'd say that's conservative, Mike.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Like I said, that doesn't include videos, and I'm rounding down. So a lot of Greyhawk. And here we are.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's I mean, you have done so much work, Mike. I mean, over the years, not only like comics and such, not even counting all of your UL articles and everything. I mean, your comics and such in the Orth Journal, your World of Greyhawk comics for years, or Castle Greyhawk comics for years. I have a cattail in my
It's a
face.
big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Castle Greyhawk was a huge project.
Again, Greyhawk Online is proud to support and sponsor Mike and his work. There are links on the front page of Greyhawk Online in the top navigation bar.
And I'd like to shout out Scott Casper, the author of Castle Greyhawk.
Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
It's cool.
Scott,
Oh, absolutely. That's a very good point.
amazing author.
Scott and Kanan, is that what he goes by?
Scott and Kanan.
Yeah.
A lot of what I do would not be possible not for collaborating.
Absolutely, and that's always a great thing. And we actually love. I personally love, like, when I want oh, there you go. Alan's holding that up. One of the things I love doing is when I want to talk you into putting a comic in the magazine or something.
Yeah.
I try and give you an idea.
Yeah, it helps if I have an idea, because otherwise I'm just never. I'll do something last minute.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't we go next? I think a lot of you might know our next co-panelist, Anna Meyer, has been a Greyhawk fan just like the rest of us for years and years, decades even.
Yeah, I started in '83 with Greyhawk, but I started gaming like '79, '80, playing D&D, and then when Greyhawk came out, I kind of became my go-to setting, and I never left it, kind of. So and then maps are my other big passion, so I just started out mapping it for my own campaign, and then the internet came around, and I started publishing maps on a website like early 2000s, and I just started doing it, and a lot of Greyhawk fans started liking it and helping me making the maps better and better, and by criticizing them, giving me constructive criticism over the years. And yeah, so here I am. I moved to California 9 years ago from Sweden, and then I needed something to do, so I started mapping full time, and that's what I'm doing. So yeah, I just love it. So yeah.
Outstanding. And I, here at the end of the line, my name is Christoph Nolan. I'm the owner and administrator of Greyhawk Online. And I started gaming, I can remember it was the summer before my 6th grade year, I think, at least. That's the first memory I really have. So 1984, 85, somewhere around there. And I had a buddy of mine who had a box set of Greyhawk stuff. And he let me borrow the book, and I said, I would love to, look at the pictures and everything in this. And he let me take it home with me one night, and I was hooked ever since. And I used to go over to his house when I was like an 11-year-old little boy or whatever, and we would play. Oh, there you go, Greyhawk right there.
Right.
They had action figures back then of Stormheart Paladin and stuff like that, and I would go over to his house and we'd play with action figures when I was a kid. So, but nowadays, I'm the owner and administrator of Greyhawk Online, which also sponsors the great library of Greyhawk Wiki, all of which is, there's greyhawkonline.com, and there are all kinds of resources there. And the biggest thing that we do is we're interested in creating and sharing for the world of Greyhawk, which is largely what all of us here are for tonight, is that we want to share our works with other fans, and we want to encourage other fans to share with the community. Because, like, if you write something for Greyhawk and it's in your book and it's in your brain and you never run a game or never do anything, that's amazing, and it's a really creative thing, but it makes you feel so much better when other people get to see it. And nowadays it doesn't just have to be the people at your table playing your game with you. You can post it online, share it with people in Japan or Australia or wherever. And I mean, people all over the world can create and share for the world of Greyhawk. And that's what GHO is all about. We also publish the Orth Journal magazine, which we just recently announced is going to be for people who donate and become patrons of Greyhawk Online. Every quarter when the Orth Journal comes out, donors will get a free print edition of the magazine sent to them. And the Orth Journal 32, as a matter of fact, the free PDF of it is going to be released tomorrow. So if anybody is actually interested in getting a print edition, they can go to patreon.com/Greyhawk Online. And if you become a patron, you can get your name in the magazine as a contributing member or a print supporter. And tonight is the very last night that you'll be able to do that. So if you're interested in having a fairly rare copy of the magazine, you can still donate to the site tonight, and you will be mentioned along with all the other contributing members in Orth Journal 32 coming out tomorrow.
Let me amend something there.
Uh-oh.
It's your last chance to get into issue 32. If you
Right.
do donate after tonight, you'll be in issue number 33.
Right, that's a very good point. Yes, all our contributing members will always be whenever they donate, they will always be mentioned in the very next issue. Tonight happens to be the last night before the PDF goes out, so the next issue right now is 32. After tonight, you'll be in 33. So. But,
or you can get lucky tonight and win one of two that are being given away.
That is absolutely right. We're giving in as one of the several prizes we're giving away tonight. When you type !/drawing, you'll be registered to win one of the 2 Earth Journal copies being given away.
Absolutely.
All right, so why don't we? Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead. What?
I said real quick before I forget. Shout out to Carlos Lysing. Wish you were here, buddy.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
We miss you, buddy.
There's Carlos's Twitch channel and Carlos's Patreon. So wish that Carlos was here to join us, but please check them both out. Definitely.
Yeah, if we'd have been at GaryCon physically all together, Carlos would have been one other co-panelist with us this year, like he was last year as well.
Yep.
I want to do one more shout out too, and we have Jason Zavoda behind the scenes, and he's going to be linking a bunch of data for us from his index as we discuss. And so thank you so much, Jason, for doing that. And here's his haul.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, he'll be
Yes,
he'll be the linker tonight. So
and he's going to make us seem smarter than we actually are.
Yeah.
So,
I'd like to actually talk about Jason Zavoda, since we're going to be talking about. Well, let's go ahead and start moving into some of our our topics and such for the panel tonight. One of the first I do want to talk about is, since Jason Zavoda is helping us. Jason produced a few years ago. He made we call it the Zavoda Index. It's called the Encyclopedia Greyhawkania, but it is a massive index of almost every Greyhawk product out there, and it has every proper noun that you can imagine. And what he's going to be linking tonight is some of the page numbers and such for the references to the things we talk about. And it is available. You can go to greyhawkonline.com/Zavoda Index or greyhawkonline.com/Encyclopedia Greyhawkania.
I got a link for that.
Awesome. And you can actually download his index either in an XML format or in a text format, and you'll be able to look up the things that he's talking about tonight. So,
Jason's index is so useful. Sorry, but you can take Jason's index and use it as a starting point to just go troll through Greyhawk lore, because what he'll do is he'll just give you the list of books where this particular term, whether that's Igwilv or Greyhawk Dragons or whatever, appears, and you can then go find it based on the standard page numbers in the book, look it up, and see if you decide, well, I want to do it that way, or I want to do it the way it is in this other book, or whatever. It's fabulous.
It is.
Are you saying, Alan, that there are contradictions in the Greyhawk published material?
I want to point out real quick for one of the viewers tonight, Bone Shooter. I saw that you entered the drawing. The drawing for all of the prizes, unfortunately, due to the way computers work and stuff, it can only work in one channel.
Yeah.
So if you're on twitch.tv/GaryCon2, you actually have to open another browser tab and watch and view from twitch.tv/Lord Gasumba, and you register there. You don't have to watch the entire time. You just have to do the entry or registration on the Lord Gasumba channel. So.
Yes, unfortunately, that's the way the systems work, and
Awesome.
Just computers.
Yeah, absolutely.
why don't we move into some of our topics and questions and stuff tonight? Since we've done an introduction, kind of set the stage, told you who everyone is. I think the first thing we kind of want to talk about is where Greyhawk is at, and like all of the things in social media where you can find it, and what all we can do with it.
You want me to start off?
Yeah, these questions were compiled from multiple sites over the last couple of weeks, and we're going to take open questions at the end as well. Okay, so we wanted to compile some questions for you all, and so thank you so very much for that. So go ahead, and thank you, Tom, for that cheer, man. Thanks.
So the primary source of Greyhawk material, aside from the stuff that's being published in 5th edition, like Ghost of Saltmarsh, and references to it, like even in various books that they've published, and adaptation notes for other books they've published, which is the Coast, is DM's Guild is a great place to get PDFs of old Greyhawk material if you are not able to afford eBay prices for the originals. And I'll just say that is an awesome location to go, and you can just search. They have a filter for Greyhawk material, and you can see all of it that's there, and it pretty much always there. And some of it is even in print on demand. I know, for instance, City of Greyhawk box set is on a print on demand if you want it, and so you can get
some of the prizes we're doing tonight are the drive-through versions of the print on demand books from Blackblade that we're going to have at GaryCon this year.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I'll say this is that there's a Temple of Elemental computer game, Temple of Elemental Evil computer game. It's a little buggy. I do recommend that you go to the fan site that kind of try to fix it and make it playable on your PC. There are the Gord the Rogue novels. There's a couple other books that are set in Greyhawk ostensibly. There, and then that's just like officially published materials and licensed materials. Then you can get into the deep well of fan community material, some of which we've talked about, others we haven't, and that is essentially where you can get Greyhawk material if you're new to it and you want to own it and understand it. On the other hand, if you can get the Greyhawk Gods list from the Player's Handbook in 5th edition. They have references to various Greyhawk things in some of the adventures already. And the most important, which right now has been Ghost of Saltmarsh, because it is set in the world of Greyhawk, and it is it's the original adventures with the original maps updated, and they've made some changes to make it compatible with 5th edition. But it's basically the same adventures. And that's actually where I'm running my campaign right now. So anyway, next person wants to talk about that?
I would actually like to say that's a really great place to start, Brian, because the first thing as fans that we have to do, I mean, if we're making the world of Greyhawk our own, we have to, know what the world of Greyhawk is or how to start or have some beginning point. And for a lot of fans, the beginning point is 576, the common year 576 in the setting. For some people, it's 590 or 91. For some people, it's 600 CY or later. But all of those eras and all of those things can almost universally, just about everything I can think of is in print is in PDF for Greyhawk nowadays. And even though a lot of it is older material, the vast majority of the actual world of Greyhawk setting material is all fluff. There's not actually oh, there you go. There's a nice one, Jay. Most of the stuff is fluff. There's actually not a lot of really crunch. Like there's not a whole lot of core, rules mechanics kind of thing for the world of Greyhawk. So even if it's set in 1st edition, even if it's set in 5th edition, there's still amazing resources. And even if you just want to plug from here and take an NPC from the Ashes and a faction from the Ghost of Saltmarsh or whatever, all of those things are available, and that's a really great place to start. Does anybody else have any thoughts about some of the source material or anything that's available now digitally, and how it's used virtually across Greyhawk?
I want to, if I could, I want to stress that it doesn't matter if you're a 5e player or a 3.5 Pathfinder player or Pathfinder 2. The old resources are fantastic. I mean, there's some really good data in them, and you can we'll talk about this later, but the Free City Greyhawk box set is fantastic. It has so much direction on NPCs, and it actually has a spot where it tells characters and they go up in level and how to, what they should do at each level. Really fantastic information. And Drive Through RPG, if you don't have the box sets, are extremely crazy. We all know how expensive they are, but going online and downloading the PDF, you really can get the data that you need, and it's a good starting point, especially if you're starting a 576 campaign. So.
Very, very true.
Drive Through RPG has most of the old PDF Greyhawk material in PDF.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Drive Through and DM's Guild are the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's just it's different faces of the same company.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they're actually both owned by one bookshelf.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Absolutely.
Let's talk about some of the other things. We mentioned a couple of websites already. But so there are we all know that we're obviously on Twitch right now. We're live streaming, which is something even 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago, would have been just astounding. I mean, how that's massively impacted fandom in general, but not just Twitch and things, but things like the Patreon I mentioned earlier allows Greyhawk Online to garner support from the community. By the way, I would like to thank Jim Vaughn, which I'm not really sure which one of our viewers that is, but Jim Vaughn just pledged to support Greyhawk Online in order to get a print edition of Orth Journal 32
awesome.
Coming out very soon. So thank you very much, Jim. So Patreon. But other things like Anna obviously also uses Patreon, but other things like the Facebook group that Brian has, or things that a lot of us use like Instagram or MeWe or various blogs like Mike's Greyhawkery blog or Alan's Kurott's Quill blog. There's so many websites out there. A lot of us use Reddit, a lot of us use use Twitter. All of these things have really, really worked towards creating a larger community. So, what are y'all's thoughts about the virtual community and how it's grown and changed for the world of Greyhawk?
So one of the things that strikes me is that with all the different platforms out there, because there's the blogs, there's forums, which we haven't even really mentioned yet, the newer platforms like Reddit and Twitch and everywhere else. There's a lot of small groups of fans organizing in lots of different places that don't necessarily know about all these resources. So I think one of the great things about being able to showcase some of these things and talk to them is to help connect the dots for some of these folks who might be interested in knowing more about what kind of content they can learn about through Mike and Anna's show, for example, or what resources are available on Greyhawk Online, whether that's heraldry or Jason's Index or other things. So maybe that's something to maybe talk a little bit more about, is how can we help build these bridges for folks?
Well, I think that's an important piece of it. But just kind of give a quick brief evolution. I mean, originally the tech side of things, like AOL folders, where the official Greyhawk stuff was consolidated during the great online purge by TSR, and the Rebel Alliance that was Grey Talk, that was the rebels hiding out from the bad evil corporation at that time. That was kind of the genesis of our the online fandom. Those early pieces where you saw people congregating in large groups to talk about a subject they loved. And that led to Cannon Fire, that led to innumerable websites in the early ages of the internet. And then as Web 2.0, all the social media stuff started to come out, it democratized the ability for people to make communities. Before, you needed someone who really understood how to make a forum or a website and would devote the time to build that community. And now it's more about where are people at and how do I get to them? And it's a different point of view. And that's kind of like why I'm on Facebook. I don't, it's not always the best platform for what I want to do, but it's where people are, and just like, Christoph using Twitter to reach people, to let them know about things. Everything has its place, and you're just trying to reach as many people as you can and provide those resources. I think Twitch is, and YouTube, the YouTube stuff is all just another iteration of what we're doing. And I know some people are like, I don't understand why we're broadcasting. Well, the whole point is reaching people that live in this environment, and they're usually a lot younger than us. And they want their information in digestible visual chunks. And it's different from when our days when we were on, black and white text forums or IRC back in the day.
I couldn't wait to get off that.
Yeah. Oh my God. And the scripting we had to do to use IRC. I mean, it's all this, that's kind of the evolution part of it. But in terms of like how you build the bridges, I think the most important thing is what we're all doing here, talking about how we can work together, encouraging each other. Like, I've done heraldry for Jay to make the visuals of his show pop a little bit more. I know Anna has been sharing maps to help him make that. I've done work with Christoph, in terms of like, I designed the original shield for the Great Library of Greyhawk, and he glommed to that, and that sent him off to the races. And he's done so much more than I could possibly ever imagine with that wiki and the website. And it's something so much more than it ever was. And I'm proud to have been a spark of an idea, but it's the energy that all of us bring and then bring out in each other is the bridge. I think
that is very, very true. Very true. And I think that's the most important part, since we're talking about celebrating Greyhawk here. One of the things about that is you can't really have a celebration by yourself. And
you can.
You can have a lonely.
You need a lot of alcohol.
Well, these days that might be. Yeah, we have to meet ourselves.
Yeah, and so like Brian, what you're saying, like doing something that encourages the creativity of others, like all of the things that all of us do here, whether it's Jay's tabletop game that is live streamed to hundreds of people and has got tens of thousands of views, or Mike's comics or on his maps, or all of the writing that Alan does, or any of this stuff, the Facebook group that Brian administrates, all of them, even if you only get like 1% of inspiration, that trigger can lead to so much other stuff, that a lot of times all somebody needs is a very small seed in order to make something grow. And that's the biggest thing, I think, how the Greyhawk community has changed so much now. Is it used to be a DM had to sit down at his table and plan his game, and he made a thing for his group of friends, and they all relied on that one person to do all of the creation and all of the illustration, all of the mapping, all of the everything for them. And now, like, you can go online, and you can ask on Reddit, you can ask on a Facebook group, you can tweet out something, to a popular creator or things, and you can say, hey, I need a 5th level cleric, and suddenly somebody will point to a link or something like that, and or they'll send you to a page, or to or they'll just send you a PDF of something they created or whatever. And there's so much sharing going on nowadays that all of these places that we're talking about, all the forums, canonfire.com, I don't think we've mentioned that one yet.
Yeah, we've mentioned it, but that was the granddaddy website for us. And let me just say, the generosity of the people here on this screen and those that are not here. I mean, when I took over the Facebook page that was originally Cannon Fire, that's now Greyhawk Resources, I didn't have a whole lot of content. And I went to Mike and I said, hey, you have these old webcomics. There's a lot of people that have never seen them. Can I republish them twice a week on the Facebook page? And he said yes. And I was like, he didn't have to do that. That was the jumpstart, because I suddenly had weekly content to put up, and that inspired other people to post their own stuff. And now the site basically runs itself. I wish I could take a lot of credit for it now, but really what I do is I walk in and I say, oh, that plate isn't spinning right. And I go, beep, and it spins and it keeps going. And I don't have to do a whole lot, because there's this energy out there that people are inspired to do things, and people ask questions, and people will just spontaneously answer them, or they'll argue about them, which is typical of us Greyhawkers.
I don't think that's just Greyhawkers. I think
that might be internet users.
Internet users, but we have a reputation. It's like we like to see how many Circle of 8 members dance on the head of a pin.
I think that's a really good point, though. And we were talking about Kingdom Fire, and Kingdom Fire has had some notable debates over the years, but even that in and of itself, like one of the things Anna said on her stream earlier about her maps, is that people would often come to her and criticize the maps and say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, but she chose to use that as a tool to make her maps even better. And so, like, even though there are occasionally debates among internet gamers and everything else, sometimes that can lead to growth, because, like, if we're never challenged in what we think, if we never have people question it or say, hey, why are you doing that, we never necessarily challenge our own thoughts and have any growth. Another one that I would like to mention, actually, where'd it go in the chat? I think it was Roxafarius mentioned a minute ago. Another, who was it? Roxafarius mentioned Pinterest as another place to find things. And oh my God, the images and things that you can find on Pinterest, and not just for D&D or gaming, if you look up Death Knight or whatever, you can look up Greyhawk, specifically on Pinterest, and so many images come up. It's amazing. I mean, there is so much stuff. I mean, and there's just so many resources out there available for everyone for the world of Greyhawk.
Let me put out something as far as community goes, and that I saw with as far as Twitch goes. So I've run for 2 years a mega stream, Greyhawk mega stream event, where we've done a fundraiser. First year we had 4 channels over 16 hours. We did it for St. Jude Children's Resource Hospital. We raised $1,010. This year we had 5 channels participate over 24 hours. Okay, including Carlos Lysing's channel, including 2 channels that don't normally do Greyhawk. We raised $2,520 over this.
Amazing.
Now, for this, I've already had channels come to me that did not participate that want to already, and they go, we want to get in, we want to be part of this community. And I said, we need more Greyhawk streamers. We just do. We really have only 3, if you can count myself, Will, and Carlos Lysing, for the most part, are the 3 that are really doing Greyhawk content right now on Twitch. So I'm just putting it out there that if that may be something that you may want to consider. Your game may be viable to do it. So
absolutely.
And you have a seminar you're doing
tomorrow morning.
As a matter of fact,
we will
always be plugging, Alan. Always.
Always. And here's the shout out for it. Bing.
There you go.
Yes.
A couple of things I want to mention, and then I think we're going to kind of scoot along to the next topic. They just mentioned Facebook a second ago. And I want to mention a few of the groups so that people might know like where to look up. I have a cat. There's a Facebook group called Greyhawk Resources, which is the one that Brian administrates. There are some others, and each one has its own sort of special flavor, kind of as to what they do or what they specialize in. Anna has the Flanaess Geographical Society.
Excellent place to be.
That is very specifically specialized in the maps and such. There's also, there's Sages of Greyhawk, And there is the Greyhawk Adventures First Edition group. Can y'all think of any other Greyhawk groups?
Or the Greyhawk Adventures. I know.
There you go.
Alan and I are part of that one. Even the first edition AD&D one's pretty good with Greyhawk. So yeah,
there's a lot, and like, so if you go to Facebook and search for Flanness or Greyhawk or Orth or any of those things, just look through the groups, and there are lots and lots of social media things available. And the same is true Instagram. Like, for example, we're Instagram.com/Greyhawk Online, Twitter.com/Greyhawk Online, Pinterest/Greyhawk Online, Instagram, I mean, all of these, but any of those services, if you go through and just search them, I mean, there are all kinds of. Reddit has a Ghosts of Saltmarsh subreddit. There's one for Greyhawk in general. There's one for Greyhawk Adventures. There's
an OSR Reddit that has a lot of Greyhawk discussion.
There you go. So you're like, yeah, just everyone go out and look for them, and just seek out other communities, community members, and other sub communities and stuff. And there's great stuff out there.
Yeah. And if one community isn't for you, trust me, there is a community that will meet your needs out there.
Absolutely.
Somebody has
Whatever
done it.
Your interests are.
And as Jay says, there needs to be more Twitch people. I can say we have a lot of Facebook groups. Maybe we can slow down on those. But but that, all joking aside about that, the fact that there's this robust community out there, and there's a lot of people interested in it. I would say the other aspect of that is really think about how you're facing outward to people. It's not enough just to be amongst the same people you've always been about and been with. Sometimes you got to say, who out there might want to come in, and how can I make them welcome?
Absolutely.
Right. And that, and that to me is, if we're talking about bridging, generational divides and play style divides and edition divides, is just welcome people in. This is about Greyhawk, not about which D&D is better, or which non-D&D system's better, or
that was always one of the.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that was always one of the great things about Cannon Fire was focused on Greyhawk. Didn't matter what edition it was. Didn't matter whether it was canon or somebody's homebrew or whatever. That's a great foundation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And always remember that, especially in this age where with 5th edition, there's new people looking into it, because Greyhawk is mentioned in some of the books now. Remember, this might be the first exposure to Greyhawk somebody's ever had. So if somebody's in one of these groups and they say, oh, you stupid newbie or whatever, you might push somebody away from the world of Greyhawk that wouldn't have otherwise found it. So always remember, it's about what you put out there. And speaking about, I'm sorry.
Okay, good. So the foundational idea I have about community organizing is more people to play with, more places to play.
Right.
If what I'm doing doesn't serve that motto, it has to go. And a lot of that is my own ego that has to go out the window about that, because it's not always about me. It's about who I'm with. And if we talk about community, I'm a part of the community, but I am not the community.
Absolutely.
And that I think is super important. So why don't you segue? We've kind of beat this topic to death.
Yes.
Segue to the next one.
We need to
speaking of the world of Greyhawk and great stuff out there, the next thing we kind of want to talk about is stuff that's out there beyond the Flanness. So the one of the things about the world of Greyhawk is that it's always traditionally been the Flanness, but there's a lot of other things that people don't realize. There's an entire supercontinent, and actually variations on that. Some people use different continents or subcontinents or other continents, but beyond the Flanness, there are a lot of various projects over the years where people have begun to expand the world of Greyhawk. And a lot of everything beyond the Flanness is sort of uncharted. Some of the maps we have are technically like they're quote unquote ancient maps, or they show realms that used to exist, or a lot of things like that. But one of the most famous is Frank Mincer's work. He did Aquaria.
And also Leonard Lakofka did the Lender Isle. That was his playground.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's actually a whole list of them. I thought perhaps we might talk about. Do any of y'all know very much about Aquaria itself? Or Anna, have you ever looked at maps of it? Or Alan, have you ever written articles about it?
I've actually signed an NDA that I can't talk much about it, but I can kind of so in that way, technically I can legally say that yes, I know more. Yeah, the reason for this is it's not. It's that Frank Benzer, I think it was 2 years ago, he started a Kickstarter to get that thing going, and he wanted both Darlene and me to do maps of it.
Oh wow!
So
That's
but
amazing.
due to unfavorable circumstances and some hiccups and the Me Too movement and a whole bunch of other stuff that ended up not going so well, so to speak. So I don't know if and ever that content will come out, but there are some things, and he called it Imperia that when he had it, and he was very firm on staying clear of Greyhawk and not even mentioning it more than he talked about a letter that from Gary saying that was his part of the setting, that he could do whatever he wants with, and that's when he kind of said, but there was a whole bunch of stuff he developed, and a lot of it I never saw, but there's some yes. So
well, maybe one day, who knows? I mean, that's often the way of projects as they come up later.
Yep.
Yeah.
I see, Joe.
Anna, have you shown any in your maps, any of the beyond the McCore Flaness areas?
Well, on my seminar, I've done preliminary work on the whole planet, so to speak, and so far I wouldn't say that it's a real kind of presentation. I'm in the phase of figuring out how to go about doing it, and that's something I've been working on 2 years, and now I basically know how to do it. So I know how to map the globe. So I'm starting to do. So I will present. It will be a gradual, because I want this to be. I could just go out and say, "Oh, this is the world, the way I see it," and then put out a proposal, and half the community will, 1/3 of the community will say, "Oh, that looks awesome." 1/3 has said that's the worst I've ever seen, and 1/3 will be like, ah. But that's not really
true.
so this needs, because this is sensitive topics, meaning there's been several different versions of it. There are ideas, there are very little substantive text and descriptions of it. So this means that this needs to be done delicately and gently, and we need to debate a bit and get used to it, and a lot of people have to have their say. And my idea is to try and do the best of, so to speak. I want to be inclusive. I want to make sure that there are plenty of cool areas that people can detail, and I want to paint a broad canvas that is inclusive and have as much possible places for people to adventure in. So to
and
speak.
speaking into that, some of the places that will probably be inspiring you are Carlos Leising's Fireland.
Yes,
I was about to say,
I know that Joseph Block has done a lot of work on the lands around
so
outside of the Flanets.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of that you called it. I know, there.
I think he just said Beyond the Flanets.
Was it Beyond the Flanets was his project name?
Yeah.
Memory, I'm old, so memory.
And so that's actually a really great point. What Anna was talking about, and Jay as well, is that there are so many fan projects out there. And one of the first actual collected projects was by a former editor of the Orth Journal named Rick Miller, who went by Joe Carthen. And he actually organized a project called Beyond the Flanets. And he was trying to gather a whole bunch of authors and to just really fill out.
He also did the most comprehensive map of Earth that I've seen to date.
And since then, a lot of people have wanted to go on with other similar projects. Like you mentioned, Joseph Block, the Greyhawk Ragnard. He did another Beyond the Flanets project that was a mapping project. And he put just a lot of all kinds of names.
Yeah, and he made a Darlene style map of the whole planet that is beautiful and awesome in many ways.
As mentioned in chat just a little while ago, Carlos Leising, a marvelous adventure writer, has actually written stuff for Fireland and commissioned a map for it.
Yes.
Rick Miller.
It's amazing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said the preview of the Fireland stuff I've seen is amazing.
Yeah, and
I'm really looking forward to it coming out.
Yeah, I hope I don't overstep the boundaries when I say that he made a map that looks like the Paizo Hawk, so to speak, the Greyhawk.
Oh,
map
it
that
absolutely
Paizo-
is, Anna.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
it's
it is
actually
gorgeous.
it's by Rob Lazaretti, who was one
Exactly.
of the founders of
Yep.
the third edition look for.
Yep. So he hired
Dungeons and
Rob
Dragons map.
Lazaretti to do it. So
Yeah.
so if I ever incorporate Firelands, that was my first go-to outside of the Flannies had been. But then Carlos told me like 4 years or something ago about the project, and he showed me some of the material and stuff. And that means that I wanted him to do that first, so I can take that and then incorporate that into my mapping efforts.
Where is Fireland geographically? It's a question in the chat.
It's east of the Tholinian Peninsula of the barbarians. So it's northeast or east of the northern edge of the Flannies, so to speak.
Yeah, where the snow, ice, and barbarians are.
It's basically Iceland of the Earth world, so to speak. It's up there on the polar circle, and it's So, and Fireland to me suggests that it's volcanic and stuff, just like the real world Iceland. Yep.
So another one is way back in the day. The now current, what is he? The CEO or the of Paizo, Eric Mona, who is was one of the very first editors of the Orth Journal. Way back in the day, he wrote Beyond the Flaness. Material all about what he felt was out there, and related things from. Here's another source for stuff beyond the Flaness is the Gord the Greyhawk novels. In some of them, there are mentioned other nations or Oriental lands and things like that, all beyond the Flaness, that a lot of people have also incorporated into their various versions of Greyhawk. Another is there's called the Black Moon Chronicles, which are a series of French graphic novels that are by one of the original guys from D&D way back in the day, a fellow named Francois Fraudeval. Even the Greyhawk Grognard, when he made his map, he used some of that as sources. And he did a little bit of a different version where he kind of condensed it some. There we go. There's Alan holding up one of the original graphic novels from Francois.
I need to get that.
And so the whole thing was Francois actually worked for TSR and lived with Gary for a while. And some of his stuff Gary had planned on incorporating into the map of Orth. And so some of those nation names were used from Francois's work. And Francois eventually went back to France and founded some really large gaming companies and stuff. But he was an author, and so he started writing these graphic novels. And so a lot of people like to use his stuff from his graphic novels as what would be in those nations in Western Auric, because he was the original author of the nations whose names were used. And there's variations and there's differences, and there's like one thing in the graphic novels, there's not like a whole pantheon of gods, you know, and so it's very different, but it's still a lot of fun source material, and the graphic novels are amazing.
And then Rob Kuntz took some of that material and incorporated an homage to that in his Chambers of Antiquities Mark Hassel level in his magazine in the 3rd edition era.
And I also want to mention something that I'm pretty sure Christoph can speak to a little bit more than I can, which is Chainmail Part 2 back in the 3rd edition days had they set the fluff of that universe for the miniatures war game, the painted miniatures war game they made on Oerth in another part of the planet, you know, away from the Flaness. And so all the factions and the countries that you could play from in that miniatures game were kind of written up, not in detail, because unfortunately that game didn't last very long. But there is officially published material from Wizards of the Coast that they did for that, if you want to use that material as well.
Yeah, and it's a really great game, the Chainmail Miniatures game. It uses the Sundered Empire setting, and there's all kinds of factions like Revilla, which is a nation of elves and dragons, and there's a socialist sort of like, I don't know, communist dwarven nation where it's ruled by a people's council. There's a faction of gnolls. There's a faction of orcs and goblins, and there's factions of humans and gnomes. There's all kinds of really great source material, and so that much like all of these different sources that we're talking about, like, I mean, Frank Mincer, Rob Kuntz, Francois Fraudeval, Chainmail, the old Dragon Annual map
that would be Skip Williams. Yeah.
And Rick Miller's stuff, Eric Mona's stuff. All of these things are really great sources of inspiration for expanding your world of Greyhawk. And again, it's all about celebrating Greyhawk, and all of these things are ostensibly set in Greyhawk. And so it makes for some really fascinating things for people to be able to say, I want to try something different, you know, but I don't really want to change Furiandi, for example, or I don't want to change the yeomanry or whatever. There's still even more world outside of the Flonesse for people to create and stuff and still have it in the same world. So the whole point is
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the whole point, I think, is don't limit yourself to thinking that Greyhawk can only be one thing.
Yeah, and when I did a quick kind of calculation, the Flanies is less than 10% of the land mass.
There you go.
On my, so it's about 10% of the land mass. So meaning 90%, and then we haven't counted the oceans and all the islands, only the land mass, and it's only 10%. So it's basically Europe of the world, so to speak. So it's meaning 90% of if you look at all the, most of the other maps that are done, it's only about 10% of the land mass.
Gosh, can you imagine if if all of Greyhawk had like the detail that like Faerun does or Eberron does or whatever, it would have 90% more material.
Yeah, so there is a huge canvas of land and that to put in there so that we can go on. So and one perfect example, there is no huge desert, no big desert in the Flanies, but
not in the Flanies,
exactly. But Uerik, the continent, it's enormous, meaning there's an area there's 5 times the Flanies in the west. There you can put a huge desert that makes the Gobi or the Inner Asia.
Well, there's actually that's a really good point for fantastical things. If somebody wanted to have like a desert setting or a desert game that went on for thousands of miles, in the chainmail material for the Southern Empire, in the southern reaches of that area, there's a desert that's twice the size of the Sahara. You know, I mean, so there's so many sources out there, and there's so many things that can be done expanding Greyhawk and making it that much more interesting for everybody's game. And speaking of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, Mike, do you have like a favorite piece that's outside the main line Flonesse, or we hit all the pieces that you talk about?
Yeah, it sounds like you nailed it all. As to what is my favorite, I haven't quite seen all of Carlos's stuff yet, but right now I would probably point people to Joe Block's Greyhawk Grognard site for all this.
Awesome.
That's the best.
So I actually want to mention something that this kind of leads into our next topic. Actually, Jason Zavoda in chat just actually mentioned another amazing expansion to the world of Greyhawk that people don't often think of. Grayspace is another fantastic direction. Is to go up rather than just side to side.
Spelljammer fan, then you can
so that actually leads us to our next topics, because Grayspace is an actual resource book for the world of Greyhawk. Like, you can go out to dmsguild.com or drive through RPG or whatever and buy the Grayspace product. I'd like everybody to sort of talk about what their favorite Greyhawk products are, like what some of your favorite modules or favorite obscure or underappreciated source book or whatever, and just what's your favorite and why, and we can just like go down the row. Jay, do you want to start and talk about what one of your favorites is?
Sure. Well, I got it right here, and it's a shrink wrap copy of it.
Uh-oh.
by far.
City
So
Greyhawk?
much content. So much content in this.
Absolutely.
It's fantastic. Came out. Let's see, when did this come out? My gosh, 1989, is it? Yeah, not era.
Yes, I believe so.
They developed a lot more in it, and From the Ashes, but I still think that the Free City Greyhawk box set's a little bit better than From the Ashes set.
Actually, I think City Greyhawk was 86.
Oh, was it?
Was it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'd have to look. It's been so
Yeah,
long.
I think it's I think it's
Details.
89. But
Okay, well, I was wrong.
no, it's okay. It's no big deal.
Anyway.
I'm wrong a lot, Brian. Trust me.
Oh yeah.
As far as modules, it's either Temple of Elemental Evil or Shokanth. One of the two, as far as the module goes.
Those are fantastic.
Yep.
Oh, Jay, Zudrag just said, "Vote for the goat."
Hey, you stole my line. I'm always saying vote for the goat.
Brian, you're next.
So I mean, I'm be really corny and just say the folio and box set, I think, are probably the key pieces. If there's any one item you should own, the 576 box set gets you started. It has just enough for you to start and run your own game set in Greyhawk. No matter what game system or edition of D&D you're playing, the information you need is there. I mean, sometimes it's difficult to find all the information you want from the way, because it's written as if it's an actual gazetteer written, from the medieval times. But that's some of the charm. And then going to the community and saying, hey, where's this? People will point you in the right direction. So I think that's kind of like, I think that's like the crucial piece that I would recommend, and one of my favorite pieces. I go back to the box set and the map in it over and over and over again. It's a constant source of inspiration, and it still surprises me. When I started putting everything into OneNote and started cross-correlating and hyperlinking things, I started finding connections to things that I had no idea that were there, because I read it and I made no connection to other parts of the book because it was in it's in a separate book. And
that's a really good point.
Right. Yeah.
I would actually, speaking of which, I would actually like to give another shout out to Jason Zavoda, because what you're talking about is one of the hardest things about the world of Greyhawk or any setting, is finding where the other places are that something is mentioned and cross-connecting them and putting it all together so that you can get a wider picture of a particular topic. And again, Jason Zavoda's index is available at greyhawkonline.com/Zavoda index.
Let me pop that up.
Oh, thank you.
And I'd also like to say is the Greyhawk Wiki, which we've inherited from Cannon Fire, and the work that Gary and the people that originally created that did, is another source of a great place. Like if you come across a name in any source that we list here and say is our favorite, and you want to know more about it, that you can get usually get a good condensed information about the topic. Sure. And Zavoda's index will tell you exactly where to look to find it in the old material. Yep. And now because they're updating the newer material. And
actually, on greyhawkonline.com, there are links on the front page to the Greyhawk Wiki. It's actually greyhawkonline.com/Greyhawk Wiki. And we're actually taking Jason Zavoda's index, and we're beginning to try and incorporate it into more and more pages, so that not only will some summarized information be available on the wiki, but also it will have the Zavoda index for other places you can look it up. Alan, you want to talk about one of your favorite projects or products?
Yeah, and this is actually a great sort of segue of using Jason's index and such, because I got started into Greyhawk research by trying to track down old Dragon magazines, because there were so many cool articles written in Dragon back in the day about Greyhawk by Gary, by Rob, by other people like Len, etc. And so for the one I'm going to mention is the Dragon Magazine Archive, which collects all the first 250 print issues of Dragon, including the 7 issues of the Strategic Review, and is a trove of Greyhawk material. Now, Jason and crew have indexed all of the content in Dragon magazine that was Greyhawk related in there. So you can use that and jump right to things. And I was just actually in my own campaign looking up and digging into the Demonic Knights of Doom from Dragon Magazine 59, which is an article Rob Kuntz wrote for something I'm going to incorporate into my, new campaign I kicked off in January. And we were talking about Jason's index and whether or not like all the other more obscure zines with Greyhawk lore in them have been indexed in it yet. Things like Rob Kuntz's Demon Senders article from Wargaming magazine number 3 or 4 in 1977, or issues of content with Greyhawk related stuff in the Domesday book and other really hard to find stuff. So I think, slowly but surely we're going to get all this stuff accumulated and indexed so that people can go find it and know that it's there and then put it to use in the game. So
really good
Dragon Magazine's one of my favorites.
Awesome.
I love it.
How about Mike? How about you? What's one of your favorite products?
Well, Jay already mentioned the City of Greyhawk box set, which is probably the one I got the most mileage out of. Mine's not shrink wrapped. It's it's fall apart book time.
Oh yeah,
well, I think Jay has one of those too.
My functioning one's falling apart too. Yeah.
I still have the box. I try to take care of it. No, I think a nice little gem is to get, if you can get it, Greyhawk Adventures hardback. It's not the best of the best, but there's a lot of like really nice hidden gems in there, and like people like Joe Block on Greyhawk Grognard, really good at adapting that stuff. Otherwise, my favorite module is probably Mordenkainen's Fantastic Adventure, Rob Kuntz.
Nice.
And the associated 3rd edition update of it in Dungeon 112. I just really like that dungeon. I ran Mar Castle way more than I ever did Castle Greyhawk. Just, I don't know, just worked out that way.
Nice.
I forgot to say my favorite module, and I'll just hands down the thing that actually prior to the folio coming out, Village of Hamlet was the one that really first, really kind of laid out some of the world of Greyhawk. Now, granted, it was just hinted at in that module, as was usual for TSR, but I was like, what's Greyhawk? And I actually went back and looked at the Giant series, which is probably one of my all-time favorite running, and it doesn't mention Greyhawk at all. That was retconned afterwards. And so I would say T1 is probably this. Not only is it just a seminal module on how to have a place for people to play out of into the world, but it was like the first one that really introduced me to Greyhawk before the folio came out. There we go.
Yeah, and I'll throw in mine real quick, which would be since Carlos isn't here, I'll stay with the Lost Caverns of Sashcan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anna, how about you? What's one of your favorite?
My favorite is one that never made it, but it is a official product, but it was never released, and that's Ivid the Undying. I just love source books. I love source books, and to me, that's when Carl Sargent had its go at Marklands and the other ones, and he kind of perfected the talk about the strategic situation, the political situation, the ideas, and it's a book that I think depicts Greyhawk awesomely. It really takes one area of and the core area of the setting in a way, the Great Kingdom and the fall of and how it disintegrated and all the factions and stuff.
And Kent Mathewson did a beautiful composite map of the Ivid environs for that.
Yep. Yeah, and someone they put it out. Originally, it came out as a Word document or a PDF or something, but someone put together, and you can Google it and you can download the PDF that is formatted to look like a real module. And
really nice.
You can download it. Yes, exactly. You can download it, and he made the map of the area. So it's been the original was just put out there, the raw text basically, and then
there you go. Oh wow, Alan printed it.
Yeah. So it's it's awesome. So that is the module that didn't make it, so to speak, but he made it out the back door. So he was officially released just out on the internet as a raw text back in.
Well, and it was published in Dragon Magazine in like 3 issues in the early 200s.
Oh, okay, that's true. Yes,
in part. They excerpted.
And then they just spit it out the thing as a back in. That's my favorite actually.
I would say that's a really great piece of obscure Greyhawk products, because there's so many products out there that, I mean, it's not as many as like Faerun or anything like that. It's easy in Faerun or Eberron or whatever for somebody to say, oh, I've never read that book. But the vast majority of Greyhawk fans who've been fans for a while have seen or heard of most all of the books out there. But unless somebody's really active on the internet and has really searched the internet for Greyhawk stuff, they really wouldn't necessarily know that one was out there. And that is a really great bit of just obscure. I don't want to call it obscure, but it's something that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know was out there.
Often
you don't see that on
gem.
DM's Guild. And you don't see it on DM's Guild, so it's not getting the love.
Right,
there.
exactly. Yeah, it's not something that's put out on the major channels or the normal sources and stuff like that. And actually, for those who might be interested, I'm actually going to, if I can
say, if you love to run a sandboxy game, even The Undying is the perfect source material for
I actually just in chat I just linked I gave a link to the Great Library of Greyhawk, and that's it's an entry on the Undying book, and on it there's actually I think on that page, I forgot to look when I just looked at it, but I think there's a link to that PDF that you were talking about.
Right. And I'll just say that particular PDF was the inspiration for the persona of Saracenis, the Sun King at Arms herald that was the narrator on my heraldry site.
Awesome.
And he was, and this is post-wars Greyhawk, and he had been turned into an animus, so he was even a bigger ass than he normally was when he was human. And so every time he's talking about non-Great Kingdom heraldry, he's kind of looking down his nose at it. And and he like picks at it. And he says, "Well, dwarves did it this way, but if humans were doing it," and and this is kind of and that kind of comes back to the box set, which is, and I think we should talk about this in terms about how to make Greyhawk your own. Is don't get caught up in what every last word is said. One of the awesome things about the box set is the unreliable narrator that Pluffett Smedger and the other people that are cited in there are, because they're coming from this humanocentric, academic point of view. And if you know anything about historical documents and historiography, the study of those things is you can't always rely on that narrator to be truthful. So it gives you the perfect excuse. If you don't like the population numbers that's written in the book, or you don't like the story, you just say, well, that was his opinion. And you go from there and you say, this is the ground truth in my campaign. And I think I think it's great that these resources are there for to use, but don't be a slave to them. Use them as inspiration for your own campaign, like I do.
That's very true. That's very true.
And that's where we get into infinite horrors. Right. The topic here is the reason my campaign is going to be different from yours. Is I'm going to change things in the way I handle them to suit my players and the story I'm trying to tell. And it's not better or worse than what you're doing. It's just different. And there's room for that. Yeah, go ahead.
That goes back to the topic that we were talking about at the very top of the show, that one of the things is that everybody's Greyhawk is different. And on the images here on the side of the live stream that are scrolling by is a quote by Steve Winter. And if y'all haven't taken the time, the next time it scrolls by, it's the big white box filled with black text. Read that quote by Steve Winter. It's from the Greyhawk Adventures hardback, and it's
actually from the box set.
Oh, is that? I'm sorry.
It's the 83 box set.
I'm sorry. The other one is from Jim Ward in the Greyhawk Adventures. Right, you're right. That's in the box set. But next time that comes up, read it before it scrolls by, because it's very important that we all understand that everybody's world of Greyhawk is a little bit different. And all six of us here, every one of us has a little bit, I mean, as evidenced by the question that we were just asking. There it is. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, and I undid it. Hold on one second. Sorry. Hey, there we go.
Forces of chaos and evil at work.
Yes, exactly.
But all six of us here have a different thing of, what our favorite product is. And that reflects, each one of us has a different product, a different person, a different favorite NPC.
A different tone. Yeah.
A different tone. Yeah. I mean, I personally like a very Tudor looking city of Greyhawk. Others like more metropolitan look or whatever. Everybody's game is different. And so, that doesn't, I'll answer the question we were just talking about. One of my favorite products is all the Western Auric stuff. I love the Chainmail Sundered Empire. I absolutely adore Francois Fraudeval's Black Moon Chronicles. And it's largely because I like kind of the more obscure stuff that lets me just kind of create whatever I want to create. It doesn't mean I don't like the Flâness. I absolutely adore the Flâness. But like, for example, Joe Block, the Greyhawk Grognard, his Western Auric, in his specifically the area of the Black Moon Chronicles, may be different than mine. I mean, his city of Syzygy may be far more southern than mine is, way up in the northwestern reaches. But neither one is different or better. Neither one is better. They're just different, like you were saying, Brian. And that's the great thing about the world of Greyhawk, is that we were told by the creator from the very beginning that
make it your own.
Yeah, exactly. And not just make it your own, but the expectation is that every DM will make it their own. And there's a lot of quotes from Gary Gygax floating around on the internet, especially if you look at the Ian World. Oh, here's another source that we were talking about on the internet earlier. Ian World has
and so does Dragon's Foot.
Had 8 different threads that were hundreds and hundreds of posts long. That was a question and answer session with Gary Gygax, and after he passed, they condensed it all into one big thread that's now like 483 pages long or something. But one of those quotes that from Gary was that somebody had asked him about making a nation their own, or how they wanted to change it. And he said that was indeed very much the sort of thing that he wished to encourage with the World of Greyhawk setting, was DM adaptation of the material to suit the campaign being run. And so, like, every table should have something different for them. Every table should be something that applies to specifically to those players and to that DM.
And I want to say something about the thing. This is the question I put to everyone here on the panel and everyone in the audience and anyone that wants to play in the World of Greyhawk. Is one of the most important appendixes in the first edition D&D book was Appendix N. That was Gary's source of inspiration for the game and his game world. So the question then is, we know what Gary's was. What's your Appendix N for yourself and your game? Because the School of Wizardry in the city of Greyhawk is going to be very different if Terry Pratchett's Discworld is your Appendix N versus someone who grew up on the Harry Potter movies and the Harry Potter books. That is going to influence how you see a wizard school and maybe how you run it. So that, to me, is the thing that shifts Greyhawk, is what are your influences? What television shows you like? What movies? What books? And it doesn't necessarily even have to be fantasy. What inspires you to tell a story? What do you steal and plagiarize from to tell good stories? Because lore is a static historical thing, and you can read it. And I call it I use Mark Merle's term, the lonely fun, because you can sit down in a dark room with a little light on and read it, and it's all you. Whereas if you're telling the story at the table, that's dynamic. That has an interaction between you and the players, and that changes. And so what inspires you? What gives you the ability to quickly move on your feet when the players inevitably change the story? Okay. Anyway, I will send it back to you guys and maybe talk a little bit about what is your inspiration that makes your Greyhawk different from everybody else.
Actually, I was actually going to say that's a great lead into the next thing that we wanted to talk about, some of like the really cool fan projects out there. But definitely, like, you know, each one of us, like, what is, you know, what are some of the cool things you do to make it different, and what are some of the cool things you've seen other fans, or what are some of the other cool things you've seen other fans do?
I think we should do it in reverse order this time. You go first.
Oh, wait, does that mean it starts with me?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things I was saying just a minute ago. Oh, by the way, I do want to actually say, for the Orth Journal that's getting ready to come out tomorrow in PDF form, the print edition is going to be still a couple of weeks from being shipped, but the PDF that's coming out tomorrow, if anybody wants to receive a print copy, we're giving two free print issues away. But for anybody else, if you go to patreon.com/GreyhawkOnline, if you sign up as a Patreon or donor to support Greyhawk Online, you get a free print edition of Orth Journal number 32. That's going to come out in PDF tomorrow and is being shipped in a couple of weeks. And if you donate by tonight, you can actually be in this particular issue listed as a contributing member. And the reason I mentioned that is because you talked about Jason, or about the Appendix N. Jason Zvoda actually wrote an article for Earth Journal number 32 about Appendix N and how to use it and some of the things that might be added to it, and we reprinted the list of the original Appendix N of all of the references that Gary Gygax wanted people to look at for it. So my favorite stuff, I really love a lot of the fan things that have been done in Western Auric, and it really allows me to write things that I wouldn't ordinarily write. I really like the Elven Draconic nation of Revilla. And I really like my personal things that I kind of change, not really change, but you mentioned the School of Wizardry, or the University of Magical Arts and the Guild of Wizardry. I read a series of novels by Lawrence Watt Evans called The Legends of Ethshar, and it has a particular like a guild of wizards, and I really like the way they're characterized. They're a major political force, and they're able to kind of force their will upon, you know, and they don't run governments, or they don't do things like that, but there are some things that they just don't allow, like they don't allow like wizards to be national rulers, because that's not really fair, you know, that other nations can't vie against them because they have this 20th level wizard as a king or whatever. And they don't allow certain people to become members of the Wizards Guild or whatever. So some people are never allowed to train in magic because of their families or their political leanings or whatever. But I really like the characterization in those novels. And so my Guild of Wizardry and University of Magical Arts is a little bit different than everybody else's, because I like to have like this really, it's almost archaic. But one of the other things I like to do with wizardry is they're on television right now. There's a series called The Magicians.
I love that series.
It's a fantastic show. So if anybody hasn't seen it yet, go look up The Magicians. But it really depicts well the use of somatic components and how they have to study for years to learn each finger gesture and why each thing is difficult. And the novels called The Magicians by Lev Grossman are really depictive of why wizardry is so much different than, like, it doesn't talk about sorcery or anything else, but like why some of the others would be so much different, because it discusses wizardry so much. And in the novels I was talking about, it talks about witchcraft and warlockery and in a lot of other magical sciences. So that's kind of why, that's kind of some of the things I like doing different. So Anna, how about you? What do you like to make different in your world of Greyhawk?
Well, I like to make maps. So my kind of setting is very sandboxy. I like to play around and create towns and kind of the big picture. I don't dig into modules and stuff that much. So I run a very simulation game, meaning I like to have factions and have the characters playing part in all the stuff that you read about in like Even the Undying and stuff. I want the characters to be part of it, not it's not just something that happens in the background and the players are just there, and then it's something that the players play an active role in, so to speak. They're part of their battles we go to, and they go to courts when there's assassinations and there's like these negotiations or diplomatic things and stuff like that. Is my campaigns are full of political intrigue, and the monsters and others play a part of it. They're due to their intelligence, meaning dragons are the secret kind of protectors of some of the realms and stuff like that. So that is very much my forte, that type of game, so to speak. Political simulation games, whether the characters know about it or not. Some players, they don't ignore it. They just want to go out and kill bad guys and stuff, and they don't care about it. But it's, for me, it's the kind of background story. So they can dig into it if they want to, or they can ignore it if they want to. So yeah.
Well, that's the great thing about a sandbox, is players can kind of
Yep.
do whatever they want.
Yep.
Neat. So Mike, how about you?
So the question is, what kind of games do I run?
Yeah, how do you make your world of Greyhawk different, and or like what have you seen other fans do that you like that makes the world of Greyhawk?
Okay. As to other fans' work, just go to my blog Greyhawkery. I'm always showcasing other people's works, so I'm not going to point to any specific stuff. Just know that we do a lot of cross pollination on our blogs. And in various things, worth journals and all that. So anyhow, as to my games, I feel like I've kind of done it all. A lot of my games here lately have just been straight out of the book, dungeon crawls, adventure path type stuff. Most of my Greyhawk writing is then all the other stuff that would only interest me, not my friends.
That's what you do.
Because clearly, none of my friends follow these streams or belong to any of the blogs or anything like that.
What about Ool?
And that's the good example. I have ran maybe one short campaign in all.
Really?
Everything else has just been writing. Yeah.
Wow. And for anyone who doesn't know, Ool is probably one of Mike's favorite nations of the Flanaess, and he has written an extraordinary amount of stuff.
I like taking unused, one person's trash is another person's treasure or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much. And he's written he's written stuff for his blog. He's written stuff for the Great Library of Greyhawk Wiki. He's written stuff for the Orth Journal. Mike has written a lot of stuff on.
Now I'm kind of on a Sea Princess kick.
Yeah, well, and that's another good point, is coming up also in Orth Journal number 32, which the PDF releases tomorrow. You wrote a rather extensive, the largest article in the magazine about the Sea Princes, and a very, very particular look at the Sea Princes.
Nice.
So.
Okay, so Alan, how about you? What are some of your fan stuff that you do, or what are some other fan projects that you like?
Well, some of the stuff that I like to do in my campaigns, kind of like what Mike was alluding to, is really kind of creating that lore and stuff. So I like to take bits and pieces of stuff that's been created by other fans and turn that into documents in my games, or kind of riff off of that and create some history for it as a document I can give to the players. So this is, some piece of lore about Ull that somebody might find. Could be something from Mike. And one of the things we were talking about a little bit earlier in terms of the Beyond the Flanaess stuff is, all this wonderful vast space out there. But one of the things you can do is you can bring that space into the Flanaess through these pieces of lore in the game, or through an NPC who comes from one of these out of reach areas and is sort of an exotic foreigner visiting town or passing through or whatever.
That's a really good point.
So I think you can really use all these things to help broaden the sense of depth to the world, even if your players are kind of going through a classic Hamlet A-series Giants module sort of progression or something like that, or an adventure, a specific adventure path or something. So one of the fans whose work I've really enjoyed, there's a couple that is from the Beyond the Flaness side. Aaron Sheffield who goes by Talmeta, created this whole area to the south of the Sea of Dust called the Sunalon Coast, which I really like. And it's near the Flaness, but it's not on the map. But it is seen in the map that's in the folio. That's sort of a glimpse of the larger span of the world outside of the immediate Flaness.
Right, and it's actually that was touched on in Dwakarthan's Beyond the Flaness project. Was it had the Sunalon Coast on there?
Yeah, so he created maps for it, and he also did gazetteer entries for each nation up on Cannon Fire. So that's just one that I've always liked.
Talmeta did?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
So all of his stuff is available, like, which I think is I think Pluffett Smedger is still in the chat. Maybe Gary Holian runs cannonfire.com. I didn't realize you can go to cannonfire.com and read all of Talmeta's stuff for the Sunalon Coast.
Yeah, if you do a search on Sunalon, you'll find a like an intro article. It doesn't have all the articles, but I think the intro article links to all of them because the word Sunalon doesn't show up in every single one of the gazetteer entries, I think. But then the other person who did some really fun stuff on Cannon Fire in the early days was one of the admin creators named who went by Montan. And he created a really neat NPC called Al Yassin, who was a painter. And he had a sage who was his sort of Plumfit Smedger persona that he wrote through called Taras Gwerhoth. And he would write these treatises about Al Yassin's paintings. So I've incorporated his paintings into my campaigns. And in fact, the piece I wrote for the Orith Journal for last GaryCon had some references into that. So it's fun to pull all these little bits and pieces of things from other people's creations into my games is what I like to do with them.
So Alan, the master of the deep cuts.
Very true. Very true. So Brian, what's one of your favorites?
So I'm going to kind of talk about what I'm doing currently because I'm a kind of chameleon. I change things based on the campaign I'm running. So currently I'm using Ghost of Saltmarsh as the basis, but instead of going to Saltmarsh, my players wanted a full-on dungeon crawl. So I grabbed the Sunless Citadel and adapted it. But what was more interesting is what I did with the players. So my players wanted to all play wackadoo things as players are wont to do. So we have a changeling in the group that's from Eberron, but I reskinned it and I made that. So the story I gave up for that was that she was a bred thrall race from the Scarlet Brotherhood, bred to infiltrate and spy on and potentially assassinate people in the world of Greyhawk. So that was a story. But what I did for influence with her, because she was having a great deal of trouble of figuring out what her character's motivations were and how she was supposed to act to the situations. And so I said, did you see the movie Hana? Where the young girl is basically raised up to become this insanely Jason Bourne level kind of character, but this young, very naive girl that has a lot of book knowledge, but not a real lot of experience in the world. And as soon as I said that, it kind of clicked, right, about who that character was. And so that's me using an influence. That's my appendix N. It's a spy thriller.
There you go.
And so that gives her the influence. Now, another character is an Eladrin from the Feywild who gated in and has not been able to get back to the Feywild, aka the lands of Fairy. And so I've been working with him and he's kind of come up with his own thing. His character's going to, but my conceptualization of it is like Fillory, which from the Magician's novels. The way to describe that for those of you that don't know the series is think The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe on acid. And
That's a great description because it is very trippy.
Right. It's got talking animals, and it's got fey creatures, and there's actually even fairies there, and there's humans, and all this weird interactions, and it's all dialed up to 11 in terms of the sensual overload, but it is really weird.
I'd like to. That's interesting stuff that you're talking about. The way you make the world unique is by making it unique for their characters and like tying them to the world of Greyhawk in a unique and interesting way. One of the other articles that we have coming out for Earth Journal number 32, which again the PDF comes out tomorrow. And if you're interested in a print edition, if you become a patron or donor of Earth Journal 30 or of Greyhawk Online, you get a print edition. And we're in the chat there. You see, keep scrolling by. If you put / drawing, you'll be registered to win some of the really great gifts that we're giving away. Two of which include copies of the Earth Journal, and Alan has contributed a series of Greyhawk Gord novels and some stuff from Blackbeard Publishing, and quite a few gifts. So, but anyway, in Earth Journal number 32 coming out is an article by Amy Crittenden. And it talks specifically about what you're talking about, Brian, is one of the great ways to make the world of Greyhawk unique is to make it unique for their characters on a very micro kind of level. But thank you for that. That's a really great point. Jay, would you like to share what some of your favorites are?
Yes, absolutely. And I know we're tightening up on time, so we should probably have questions after that. So everyone knows that back in 1980, there was a box set. There was nothing else, right? So I had to create it on my own. And as Brian says, I made Greyhawk my own. I have the Order of Ulick. The entire campaign's based on the organization. And we've run with it for 40 years, my friends. And it's just such a great feeling to keep, people I hold dear close to me for that long. And as of last night, we have run our 875th adventure. And I'm not talking about gaming sessions. That's adventures. So yeah, we have 19 different adventuring groups, 220 members of the Order of Ulick, organizations like the Selenian Sus Forest, Night's Watch, and goes on and on and on. But you can do that. There's no reason. I mean, I've taken it to a little bit of a crazy level, right? But there's no, make it. That's what this whole fandom renaissance is about. Make it your own. I see Tommy John Kelly's stories and I just light up, right? I see David Leonard's posts, and having David on the show is awesome. We have, by the way, if you're into Living Greyhawk, we have Living Greyhawk people on once a month on our channels to talk about the days of Living Greyhawk, and talk about their areas that they were triads for. It's fantastic. It's just, you guys all know, most of you know me. I don't need to talk about my stuff. I want to talk about everyone else. It's exciting time.
To be in
the world. Yeah, to be in the world of Greyhawk.
And you mentioned a couple there that we didn't even think about earlier when we were talking about all of the digital resources and stuff that can be found online. GreyhawkStories.com. By Tommy John Kelly is an amazing resource.
Let me re-shout him out.
He writes some really fantastic stuff.
There's yours, David. There's Tommy's.
David Leonard Greyhawk Musings is David Leonard wrote a short story that's along this topic of infinite Earths. He wrote an article. He wrote a short story for the Earth Journal number 32. There are just so many really cool fan projects out there right now. I mean, it's amazing to see.
Casey Brown's summaries of the Bandit Kingdoms.
Oh gosh, yeah. If anybody is a Greyhawk fan out there and has not seen, I mean, we all know that the Living Greyhawk campaign.
I beat you, Alan. I beat you.
There you go. Both of them have the books up. If you're a Greyhawk fan and you have not, it's available on a lot of print-on-demand sites. It's available from Amazon. Casey, we just absolutely love that you did that book. And actually, there's a a project that we were briefly talking about in some chat last night about possibly beginning to sponsor some indexing of the Living Greyhawk material, much like Casey did, and eventually trying to get Greyhawk Online is actually working on a project that we've been working on for years, trying to get some of the old Living Greyhawk triads to let us re-host some of their sites. So like you can go to Greyhawk Online now and look at the old Grand March pages, you know, and we're still trying to get some of the others, you know, like Kioland and High Folk and stuff like that to also, you know, to still let them in. Ideally, we would get all of that stuff up and be able to do more projects like Casey's, because it's a really great one.
And I just want to point out there is some Living Greyhawk stuff that is still available to get.
Sure.
The Living Greyhawk journal, it's hard to get the first 5 issues, 0 through, well, actually, I guess it's 6, but 0 through 5, I guess they're now available in DM's Guild as PDF downloads.
They are. Yep.
Okay, so you can get those, but the old issue, they then forced that into Dragon and Dungeon magazine, and so there's a whole series of those articles in there.
Yep.
And there are the old Living Greyhawk Wizard of the Coast website is actually still available if you know how to kind of sneak your way into the old crevices of Wizards of the Coast, and you can actually link to those.
That's absolutely true, and has been for quite some time. That like if you still had the links or you knew where to find the old archives, that they were all still there and hosted. I think recently Wizards of the Coast changed some of their file associations or formats for searching, because a lot of those pages just in the last week or so have started coming up blank.
Oh no!
So yeah,
so way back
the Internet Archive.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say, so, that is a fantastic resource we didn't even talk about, the Internet Archive. If you, I want to touch on this, and then we'll move on to some open Q&A from the audience.
First question, Joe Block. He went right there.
Okay,
Living Greyhawk, is it published source canon or not?
Okay, hang on. So I want to touch on that last subject before we jump directly to Q&A. If you ever find old links for anything Greyhawk, if it comes up a dead link, always go to the Internet Archive. It's absolutely just absolutely a fantastic resource, and you can almost always find backups of old sites there. So but yeah, so now let's go straight into some Q&A. We've got about 15 minutes left or so, and we want to do the prizes first, but let's try and do some good questions.
We can go a little late because there's no one on after us, so we're okay with that. Joe, so Living Greyhawk, published source canon or not? The Living Greyhawk Gazette is, in my opinion, but the rest is not. What do you think?
I think that largely just depends on everybody's individual preference for their own campaigns. There is nothing there. One of the great things again about the world of Greyhawk is that there is officially published sources, but nobody can say you have to play with anything in particular.
And you can change it from campaign to campaign. So in one campaign, Ivid might be canon, and another campaign, it might not be.
Yeah. And it's really difficult to talk about the concept of canon because there are so many people out there that want to say this is absolutely true and this is absolutely not. And it very much depends on what you're doing. And I mean, we can say that the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer is an officially published source. We can say that a lot of other adventures, even I don't know, Fright at Tristor is an officially published source, or any particular novel is an officially published source. But I don't think anymore that we can really say, absolute canon or not.
Okay.
And part of it is that when we start using the word canon, that means there's something that's in and there's something that's out, and that's when the arguments really start.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why we've kind of
Great point.
moved to officially published sources as a way of talking about that rather than canon, because I'm not wanting to fight with people about what is true about Greyhawk, because everybody, it's an opinion right now. And, if your campaign does it one way, then it's true for you. But I'll say this about Living Greyhawk. What I see that is not only was it one of the biggest shared world campaigns and a wonderful experiment that we'll probably never see the like of again.
I think it was probably the biggest.
I don't have numbers, so I'm not going to speak to that.
It was bigger than the Forgotten Realms originally.
Yeah, and I'll just say
City.
Living City. Yeah, and I played a little bit in that, but I cut my teeth for organized play in Living Greyhawk. And I'll just say this is, it was an amazing experience for its time, but it was basically the world's biggest home campaign ever written. And
exactly.
I think,
that's exactly what it was.
Yeah. And I don't think that as far as, I don't think we'll ever see a quote unquote official publication by Wizards of the Coast for it.
Yeah.
If DM's Guild opens to Greyhawk in 5e or whatever edition they finally get around to it in, I think then you'll start to see maybe some of the old authors adapt their older material without the serial numbers filed off, and then you'll see officially published sources for that.
So let's try and take another one from the audience. If we have another question out there, if there's anything that you guys might
quick shout out. Joe Selby is back on Legends and Lore a week from Wednesday, April 8th, and he is a Living Greyhawk monster, right? Jay Lloyd.
Great, yeah.
So just note, we have a Living Greyhawk episode once a month, Anna, Mike, and me. So it's alive and kicking for them. So let me see here. Chat is going by like we're on a Critical Role. Woohoo!
It is kind of going fast.
Exaggerating a little bit here.
One of the things I saw mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, Joe Block, the Greyhawk Grognard, said, how about some more Ultra sources like Quag Keep or The Eyes Have It? I think those are really great resources. I have both of them right up here on my shelf, where all of my Greyhawk library resides. Personally, I think, I use them. I think they're fantastic.
Yeah, the novel Keith Strom did for Tomb of Horrors is fabulous.